What if I told you that there's a game made back in 2008 that revolutionized the gaming industry in a dozen different ways, up to this day looks and feels so unique and beautiful that there is not a single other game to come close to its style and vibes, gives you pure emotions that almost all modern games fail to do, and you probably forgot about this game's existence, or maybe even never knew about it. Mirror's Edge is a certified cult classic that was brave enough to try and break all the well-established video game rules that existed back in those years. It was a first-person game, but not a shooter. It didn't have a dirty world aesthetic filled with dark grey colors. It was an adventure game, but not a third-person one. And there are many other feats that people didn't even think about existing before seeing this game. It was an experiment that would have miserably failed if it had done at least one thing imperfectly, but the developers nailed every single element and created a masterpiece. Today, I want to convince all of you to give this game a shot yourself. Experience all the amazing things it offers, and remember it, because this title deserves far more recognition and respect, even though it already has a very passionate following going for it. If you know nothing about Mirror's Edge, it's a first-person game that focuses on movement. The only core mechanic this game offers is parkour. There's a little bit of shooting that was most likely added due to pressure from the publishers, and melee combat too, but other than that, you just run, jump and slide in this game, and it's one of the main reasons this title is a masterpiece, and the reason why its sequel didn't have as much success and respect from the fans. Mirror's Edge focuses on one thing only and does it so well that no one else in the world could have done it better. You can imagine it as someone that can cook only fried eggs, but does it so deliciously that you just don't want anything else. Although, one of the first things some of you will pay attention to besides parkour is the visual style. I bet that you just can't name a single game that looks and gives the same feelings as Mirror's Edge, and you will immediately recognize a screenshot from it, even when put amongst other great looking games, which is a thing that developers focused hard on achieving. It has a very strict color palette, focusing on white and some neat accent colors, with red being the game's main accent color. The game also has no UI at all, except the small dot in the center of the screen, which actually plays a really important role of helping the player not feel motion sickness from all the movements. For me, there's probably no other game that looks so familiar and realistic, and connects so well through visuals. The city in Mirror's Edge just weirdly feels like home, a place that I know and have been to countless times. But it's not only the graphics that make Mirror's Edge feel so realistic. It's really only a small part in my opinion. The biggest and most important part of the game is, quite obviously, movement. Mirror's Edge is the only game I know that connects the player with the main character so well. I shit you not, you really feel every move like it's your own. You feel the weight transfers, the struggles when moving up pipes, the breath control, and I know all that sounds extremely cliché, but trust me, you'll understand and agree with me after 1 minute of playing the game yourself. It's just something you can't fully convey with words, you have to experience all this yourself. For now, just trust me when I say that no other game does it this way, although I have one thing to show you that can maybe convince you. Check out the death animation when you fall off a building. This shit legit makes me scared when I see it in game like I'm falling myself, and it's not the only part of the game that gives me so much pure emotions, especially fear. There are countless wonders done on the technical side that might call this real, with many of them being introduced for the first time in the gaming industry, and the ideas and tricks done here are still used in modern games and some even became common to use. For example, you can actually see the whole body during gameplay, including the legs, hands and even torso, and it's not done in an exaggerated way like many FPS games did it, with the point of view being somewhere in the middle of the player's body so the gun looks better. In Mirror's Edge you actually view the world just like Faith, the main character, does, straight from her eyes, and in the same way you see the world in real life. It might seem like a small thing, but it adds immensely to the experience and making the game believable. Besides this, a really interesting part of Mirror's Edge is the sound design. I don't want to get into the technical details of it, since it's a really deep rabbit hole, but I'll just mention that there are dozens if not hundreds of small details. Every footstep is heard accordingly when the character actually makes a step. Every surface sounds different, breathing of Faith is actually connected to her speed and so on. And yes, many games do these things, but definitely not on a such deep level. You may not distinctively hear every sound, but there are layers and layers of them to make every move sound so good. And And since Mirror's Edge focuses on a thing that all of us can find pretty relatable and common in real life, that being literally moving, except you're a League of Legends player, the focus on small details in sound design and animations is what allows Mirror's Edge connect with the player so well. And this connection level allows for emotions and motivation to run that almost no other game can give you. When I talk about Mirror's Edge, I often note how it makes me feel scared like it's my own life. As I mentioned before, falling off a building is indeed scary here. Despite it being the game's main way to fail and happening fairly often during playthrough, it is always as scary as when you fall for the first time, just as it is in real life. And you fear falling off throughout the whole game, which I personally have never experienced in other titles, where dying is just a common feature that you don't really pay any special attention to. Besides dying, I feel the same about fighting enemies or being chased by them. I played Mirror's Edge for the first time when I was around 7 or 8 years old, thanks to my brother, and I still remember to this day some of the fighting sequences and chases from back then, because I was scared of them so much. And after replaying the game 12 years later now, I still get the same feelings. Since the game makes you believe everything that happens and you feel like you're the character, you actually feel vulnerable and scared for life in some moments. Even though you can shoot in this game, which is in my opinion a pretty big letdown, because it doesn't really fit and slows down the game a lot, you still start every fight with your hands only, while the enemies are always armed. And it's damn scary to fight some of these dudes. Not only because they look like real-life SWAT teams and police, but in the game it's pretty easy to die from being shot. I don't necessarily like the amount of fighting sequences in Mirror's Edge, and many people think the same, but I have to pay respect to them since they managed to give pure emotions too, which, as I already said a dozen times, can't really be felt in other games. The scariest part for me was always the pursuit cops. All the other enemies were armed with guns, and that was what made them dangerous. But pursuit cops are different. They are trained to run and parkour just like you. They don't have firearms, but still got tasers and the skills to do everything you do. Encountering and running away from them is one of the scariest experiences I've had in my whole life of gaming. It feels the same way as we all felt when we were kids, turning off the lights at night and running to our beds as fast as possible until some monster catches us or something. And I have to really appreciate the sound design here too, because what makes this so scary is that you hear the cops running behind you all the time, and you can't really turn around to see how close they are. You can only judge by the sound of their footsteps. Here's an example. Once again, you probably won't feel the same way just by watching the video, but when you will play the game, you'll totally understand what I'm talking about. There are too few games that can make you feel all this. I will mention though that despite all the things I've praised, Mirror's Edge is not exactly perfect and has its flaws. It's just that the most important things were done so well. One of the main letdowns of the game is its story, which is not exactly terrible, but definitely not the best, especially considering the game is extremely short, taking around 6 to 8 hours to complete it. But you gotta understand that the story is the last reason you'd want to play this game. You play it because of the gameplay and all the other things. It would have still been as good if you remade the story completely, it just doesn't matter that much. The other things is once again the shooting parts. Since the game was such a brave experiment, throwing all the known rules to the trash bin, there just had to be something more familiar to the publishers so it would see the green light. It's only my assumptions, but I don't believe that the developers wanted to include guns whatsoever. It just goes against the whole principle of the game, and during the playthrough it just turns it into a regular FPS for a few minutes, absolutely killing the momentum and the movement part. The sequel, by the way, did remove the feature of shooting, but has done a lot of things differently in general, which deserves its own video and has been already covered by many other fans. It went a different way to implement the core ideas, and it doesn't play the same as the original game. However, I still personally like it and enjoyed it for its own values, so despite the mixed opinions on it, I'd still recommend all of you to play it as well. But besides those two things and some technical issues the original Mirror's Edge had, I honestly think it's perfect in every other way. Mirror's Edge changed the game industry and showed what a well-executed experiment can be like. Many people got into parkour solely due to this game. Titles like Dying Light and Ghost Runner exist probably solely because Mirror's Edge existed. For the most of you, there is no good reason not to try Mirror's Edge at least once. It's dirt cheap compared to many mainstream games, but it gives you so much more than they do. I encourage every single one of you to play it. If you don't like it, let it be, but those who enjoy it will definitely remember it for a long time, and Mirror's Edge deserves this recognition. I'll be happy to read comments of you sharing your experience with Mirror's Edge if you had any, so please write about it down below. If you liked my storytelling and want to see videos about other gaming gems and perhaps just other topics that I want to cover here, subscribe and join my Discord channel for updates. I already have some more interesting videos coming up that you don't want to miss. And if you want to support me, consider subbing to my Patreon. I'm not exactly sure what I'll be doing on there, so for now it's just a good way to support me. But I do have plans on sharing some exclusive content and engaging with you there. See you next time when I tell you about a forgotten multiplayer mode that you most likely missed out on.